So what we saw when we looked at not only our mobile forecast numbers, but we went back into some of our inputs. One of the leading inputs in how we put these things together is usage. So within search, we looked at local search volume, mobile compared to desktop, and we saw something very interesting, which is those two trend lines intersect around 2015, and then by 2016 we see local searches on mobile devices eclipsing the desktop equivalent. And there are a lot of reasons for this, one being kind of smartphone penetration. We kind of broke down local searches per user per month on the mobile device, which are now at about 14, going up to about 42 by the end of the forecast period. And that's just the local searches, not overall searches happening on the mobile device. But not only searches per user per month, but overall search users, so volume of users, which right now, we kind of going by ComScore numbers, mobile search users are about 45% of the overall US mobile subscriber base. So that puts them right around 118 million users. That's going to grow to about 75% of the overall US subscriber base. Again, much due to smartphone penetration, to about 225 million users. So that's kind of the background on where we see things going.
I think no one's surprised, right? Everyone's expecting this to happen sooner or later. Kind of surprised this year when we polish this thing up that we actually see mobile local queries outstripping desktop queries by 29 billion queries. That's not an insignificant amount of traffic. But just to be clear, the mobile traffic is much different. I think Mike said about 10 or 11 searches per month.
14.
Right? So sorry, 14. On the desktop, it's 109, 110, right? And on the desktop, you look at about 100 pages, 100 pages a day, 3,000 pages a month, 3,500 pages of content a month. So on the display side, how many do you look at on mobile?
Display side, actually, I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly what that is. I mean, we're looking at just search here. But one other point that I want to bring up is that we're fairly reliable in these numbers, because the interesting thing in looking at mobile search is that Google owns about 95% of that market. It has the search market share of about 95%. That compares.
So you would call that a good business?
Yeah, I would say that's an enviable share. But the point is that by looking at Google's disclosures, you can make a lot of assumptions based on at least where we start with these figures, because we know their overall search figures. We know that they have disclosed that 20% of overall searches are mobile and 40% of those are local. So we know that number to be pretty reliable.
So this slide, desktop's going to grow. Desktop local search is going to grow at a CAGR of about 12.1%. Look, I mean, it's kind of a mature business, right? I mean, people say, well, how come it can't grow faster? Well, it's hard to take $5 billion and turn it into 10 billion and turn that into 20. I mean, 12% CAGR is actually pretty good. Gets a little flat in the end. In the outer years, it grows about 5%. But mobile, on the other hand, is going to contribute about a third.
And the interesting thing here is you look at the fact that search volume is higher, but the actual ad dollars are lower. And I think that's emblematic of the fact that advertisers aren't yet kind of keeping up with the supply side of the inventory that's available, and I think that that's bound to be seen as Madison Avenue will usually trail behind. And I think this is a great point. I mean, why we are optimistic that growth will come is we're kind of going to see some natural kind of evolution and equilibrium through the supply and demand sides of the equation. Right now, if you look at time spent per media, mobile's 23%, but yet the ad share, the ad spend per media, it's only about 1%.
So if you look at this in 5 years, where do you think it'll be?
Probably closer to, I would say, 5 to 6% ad share, ad spend per media.
Still that much. Okay.
So this is interesting too. So I think one of the things that's going to drive a lot of the mobile growth we foresee is the fact that these are not only quantitatively incremental searches and impressions that you see on the mobile device, but qualitatively speaking, they're proving to be kind of further down the funnel, where there's higher intent, higher immediacy, and we're seeing that play out already in basically the performance metrics. So you're seeing higher click-through rates in search. The figures you see here are from XAD, so this is in-app search, but numbers we see from Google are very similar. But more importantly than the higher click-through rates that we're seeing when you compare it to the desktop is what we call secondary actions. Things, and this really brings out the kind of user intent when you see high degree of calls happening or generating maps and directions. Or one thing that's not represented here, but we're going to go into our mobile sessions tomorrow, is kind of the next step in mobile payments. Being able to track the conversion all the way through to completion. Very powerful thing that we're going to be starting to talk about here. But the point here is that the attractiveness of these ads are, I think, going to really drive a lot of the growth.
Yeah, it's closer to the purchase decision. Look, on the desktop, average average search that hits a landing page turns into about a phone call 7% of the time, depending on the category, the geography, where it sits in the search radius. So you have a lot more searches on the desktop, but what you have are just less of them coming to the local. So on local, about 17.5 or so of the searches are all local. 40% if you account everything, if you believe that even if a line listing doesn't show up and someone searches for a car, if that's local. And the desktop is actually substantially high, the mobile device is actually substantially higher.
Well, Google reports that for search, 40% of their searches on a mobile device have that local intent, compared to the desktop, which, as you mentioned, is about 17%. Also, not only is it 40%, about a year ago that was 30%. So it's clearly not just high, but has a lot of momentum behind it.
And a lot of that is constrained by inventory, right? So there's not enough mobile advertisers out there to really drive the economics enough. But that will change quickly. The point of the slide is there are a ton of valuable actions that are happening on the mobile device. It's just a matter before networks start to move over their inventory, their advertisers.